So do these high and steep molds on a fingerboard really make a difference? So today we're going to be looking at my fingerboard setup with a high mold. This right here is a Gooltd Symmetrical higher die mold fingerboard. This is actually my first one of these. I know the steep concave has been out for a little bit, but this is my first steep concave board I've actually got to use. It's about a 36 millimeter. It might be even 37, honestly, now that I look at like the board over the trucks. Either way, it's kind of wide, but it has a symmetrical nose and tail. The steepnesses are exactly the same. Compared to my mid mold board, you can really tell the difference. Like this high kick is pretty gnarly. Like you can tell it's definitely a handful of degrees steeper than the mid mold. When I first saw this mold, actually, when I first saw the deck, it kind of reminded me back in the day when I was a kid with our tech decks. We used to take lighters and kind of burn the nose and tail and push them up to make them a little bit steeper. And the reason why we would do that was it would kind of make it easier to ollie. Before we get into all the little specs about this board, I do just want to go over my complete. Like I mentioned, this is a Gooltd board. It's a symmetrical popsicle that we got going on here. I got some black cat grip tape. These are the hex trucks. These are kind of like, these are pretty inexpensive trucks. They're probably only like 15 bucks maybe. Honestly, I've been really liking these. These are also like the 36 millimeters. I pretty much all I did was take out the washer on mine just to make it a little bit looser. Otherwise then, I honestly don't have any complaints with them. Got these kind of wider wheels from Chems FB like years ago. I'm not sure if they're still there, but honestly, these have lasted me a super long time. More on the plasticky side than like the urethane side. So they don't make a bunch of squeaky noises, but they do slide really well. So there's a few things about this high concave board I do want to talk about. When you set up these boards right away, you're gonna feel how steep that kick really is. It's actually pretty aggressive. Like I was honestly a little bit afraid of how that was gonna like actually skate and react. Just because, like I said, when I was younger, we used to do this, but it kind of all came back to me. As soon as I popped my first ollie, I was like, wow, ollieing with this thing is so easy. The steeper kick, it's just gonna allow you to get your board back and up faster. Being able to pop up so quick is kind of good and bad. It definitely takes a little bit of an adjustment period. When I was doing my kickflips at first, this would always happen, where I would kind of pop and my finger would just kind of take off with my board. I honestly like it in a sense that like when I do certain tricks like 360 flips, it's almost kind of pressured. Like if you saw that, like I didn't even really pop it. It just kind of, it just scooped. See that? It's not really popping like that. It kind of scoops. So I think it kind of makes it easier to do some tricks like that. If you're really used to a flat board with a very flat nose and tail, like if it's just not very steep, your kick flips and stuff are gonna be super aggressive and high at first. But I feel like after a session or two, you kind of figure it out. I think my grip tape is super grippy as well, so that makes it stick even more. But I think once you kind of figure out that nose and tail, I think you'll really like it. I think also on the wide board really helps as well. I think the steep kick on something narrow like a 32 might be a little bit crazy, but this just kind of levels it out a little bit more, makes it a little bit easier to catch since it is wider. Going back to even if you're new to fingerboarding or if you're not very good at ollieing or something, this might be a really good option. Another way I kind of always tell people to learn how to ollie is this way, where you put your tail kind of at the edge of something and you can kind of practice doing this. And this makes it really easy with the steep concave. It's actually surprising how much easier it makes it with this thing. I do want to mention with this kind of higher kick, I feel like it was actually easier to do heel flip tricks. I'm not very good at heel flip tricks, but I feel like with it having a really steep nose, it's actually easier to get my finger to flick off the edge. Maybe that's why the kickflips work so well with it and kind of over grip, sort of say, because of that big nose and just how steep it is. Kind of want to mention another thing. The steep nose and tail helped with my switch tricks and my nollie tricks too. You know, when you pop, it just gives you that extra little advantage. So that really just helps me out when I do switch flips, even learning switch heel flips. It kind of makes it a little bit easier on this board. My other friend Brandon actually got one of these high mold boards as well. It was the first time he ever got to use one. And it was actually pretty cool to see him even say like it was helping him with his switch flip back tails. Certain tricks that he was doing, he said it even felt easier, a little bit more stable. So I think with the high kick on the nose and tail, it might be a little bit of an adjustment period getting used to it, but overall I think it does help. And it's definitely a fun board to have in your collection. So if you don't have anything with a super high kick concave like this, I definitely suggest trying it out. I think you might be surprised actually how much you do like it. And if you are learning how to fingerboard right now, if you're watching this video and you're trying to figure out what board to get, maybe look into something with a high kick with nose and tail. Like I mentioned before, it's just kind of easier how to ollie. Practicing how to ollie off of the edge of something like this, I just feel like this board does have a few benefits like that. I kind of also want to mention another kind of benefit about these boards with the higher kick. I do feel like when you are doing like a nose slide or tail slide kickflip out or any flip trick out, since you can kind of leverage your board even higher off of it, it definitely makes it easier to do tricks out of it, to flick out, even if you're popping up to any of those combos or something. I feel like having that steep nose makes a real big difference. Or the steep tail. So it's kind of like another advantage I do want to point out on these boards. I honestly surprisingly liked it way more than I thought. I've just gotten a few questions about these boards, how the high kick on the nose and tail feel. I think it's definitely worth trying out, especially if you don't have anything like this in your collection. And if you're just learning how to FB, it might be another good option to try.